Ever had to send flowers for a funeral in another country?
Oh, yeah.
It can be a little tricky,
It really can be.
especially somewhere like Hong Kong with such a rich cultural history.
Lots of nuances to think about.
So today we are diving into funeral flower etiquette in Hong Kong, using what we found on Flower Delivery Hong Kong.
Great resource.
Like we were your guides to expressing condolences with confidence and respect.
It's a really thoughtful gesture,
Yeah.
you know? And all those little details can make a big difference.
So like when you think of sending condolences, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Mm.
For me, it's a card addressed to the family, maybe saying, thinking of you, offering condolences, that sort of thing.
Right.
But this website says in Hong Kong, it's actually customary to address those funeral flowers straight to the deceased.
Oh, wow.
Even suggests something simple like in loving memory of.
See, that's interesting how customs can be so different from what we're used to. Like directly addressing the deceased on the flowers might seem unusual in some cultures, but here in Hong Kong, it's like this mark of respect, directly acknowledging their passing.
That's really interesting. So, okay, we know who to address the flowers to now, but where do they actually go?
Usually you'd send them straight to the funeral service.
Okay.
And this is where understanding the type of funeral really helps.
Right, because you'd send them to a church for a Christian or Catholic funeral, but maybe a funeral hall or a temple for Buddhist or Taoist ceremonies.
Exactly. And sending them to the family home after the funeral, that's a nice gesture of support too.
Okay,
But it's not as common to send them there before the service.
gotcha. That makes sense. So we've covered the who and the where. So now the big question, the what? Choosing the flowers.
Right.
This is where it gets interesting because this website really emphasizes that picking the right flowers is absolutely crucial. It even says to avoid like environmentally friendly or reused flowers. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it really shows just how important the symbolism of flowers is at a funeral.
It's like presenting this beautiful bouquet as a way of expressing hope, even in the face of loss.
Exactly.
So fresh flowers are key. Now, what about the types of flowers and the colors? I'm seeing some very specific guidelines here depending on religion and cultural context.
Yeah, definitely. It's really important to understand those nuances. So for Christian and Catholic funerals, white lilies and roses, those are really popular choices. You'll also see a lot of funeral wreaths.
And I'm guessing that's because of what white represents in those religions.
Yeah.
Purity, peace, eternal life. So
Yeah.
you're picking flowers that visually embody what the funeral service is all about.
Exactly. Now, with Chinese funerals, white is still traditional, representing purity and respect, and you also see yellow there, representing balance and earth. But this is important. Red is a big no-no.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why is that? Because red is so vibrant. It makes me think of happiness celebrations, good luck even. Basically the opposite of what you'd associate with a funeral.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In Chinese culture, red is just so strongly tied to those happy feelings, so using it at a funeral would be really disrespectful.
Wow. It's amazing how much meaning can be packed into just one color. So white and yellow are good choices for Chinese funerals, but stay away from red. Got it. What about Buddhist funerals? Anything specific we should know there in terms of like flowers or colors?
Yeah, you'll often see lotus flowers and white chrysanthemums at Buddhist funerals.
Makes sense when you think about it. The lotus growing from muddy water into this stunning flower. It's like a perfect metaphor for the soul's journey, and the whole idea of enlightenment in Buddhism.
Right. It's such a strong symbol of spiritual growth and purity. And the white chrysanthemums, well, they represent peace and remembrance, which also fit in really well with Buddhist beliefs.
It's incredible how these choices aren't just about aesthetics, but about aligning with those deep philosophical and spiritual beliefs. So we've covered Christian, Catholic, Chinese, Buddhist. What about Taoist funerals? Any flower etiquette we should be aware of there?
For Taoist funerals, white and green are the best choices.
Makes sense.
White, like we said, represents purity and respect in many cultures. And green, especially in Taoism, it's about harmony with nature, balance the flow of life.
Right, because Taoism is all about living in harmony with the natural world and how everything's connected.
Exactly. It's about picking flowers that reflect those core Taoist values. Speaking of Taoism and Chinese traditions in general, there's this custom, the 7 days after death tradition. Have you heard of that?
I have, but I'd love for you to explain it. I think it's such a beautiful tradition.
It's based on this belief that the spirit of the deceased comes back home for 7 days after they die. So sending flowers during this time, it's not just about saying you're sorry for their loss. It's about honoring the deceased during this very specific time and supporting the family as they go through this.
It's like this extended period of remembrance and support, you know, recognizing that grief doesn't just end after the funeral's over. Are there any other post-funeral etiquette tips we should keep in mind, especially related to Chinese customs? I know the website mentioned something about visiting homes with newborns.
Oh, yes, that's right. There's a belief that you shouldn't visit homes with newborns or pregnant women after a Chinese funeral.
Yes, that one really stood out to me as such a specific custom. Why is that?
It goes back to this idea that you find in a lot of cultures, although it might look different in practice of protecting those who are seen as more vulnerable. In this case, it's about not transferring negative energy. Newborns and pregnant women are seen as especially susceptible, so this custom is a way of keeping them safe.
It's really interesting how these cultural beliefs and practices often come back to caring for the most vulnerable people in a community. It's fascinating to think like all these traditions, how they reflect a deeper understanding, you know, of life and death and the importance of community when someone passes away. We've covered so much: how to address the flowers, where to send them, color choices based on religion, even those post-funeral traditions. I'm really starting to get how much thought goes into this whole process of choosing funeral flowers in Hong Kong.
It's definitely not just about grabbing any bouquet from the store.
Right.
It's about making sure those choices fit with really deep beliefs and customs.
Totally. And while these guidelines are super helpful, I'm sure there are times when someone might still feel unsure about what to do.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give to someone who wants to be respectful, but they're worried about getting it wrong?
I think it always comes back to personal connection, understanding what that specific family prefers. So if someone's ever in doubt, reaching out to someone closer to the family is always a kind thing to do. They can give you guidance based on the situation, and they'll know what's most appropriate.
Yeah. It's always better to be respectful and ask if you need help.
Yeah.
This has been so interesting. It really makes you think about how different cultures honor those who've passed away.
Yeah.
And all the meaning behind those traditions.
Absolutely. It's so important to remember those differences, especially at a time like this.
Definitely. So to everyone listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do these traditions resonate with you? Does anything stand out to you now, maybe in a new way after learning about it? It's something to think about as we wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.